So this is the session in which we bring you up to date on the past year, where the GMV sector is now, and what MVT is doing about it. We're going to have to squeeze the session slightly because obviously thanks to the Lizzie line we were late up again. Who can believe that can possibly happen twice in 2 years? But we're going to try and run through everything that we need to before lunch. Okay, so we're going to start with the size of the network. As you can see here, the number of trading venues in 2022 was 960. 2023, quite a significant drop for reasons that we've shared with you in the past, 835. This year's annual survey tells us that the number of trading venues has dropped only by 5 to 830. So a 0.6 decline between 23 and 24 obviously looks like really good news, with the number of trading venues only slightly down. However, that statistic is hiding a range of very, very challenging circumstances, and that's obviously what we're going to tell you about this morning. So first of all, I'm going to hand you over to Sophie Asquith, who is our venue support team manager.
Hi everyone. For those of you in the room who might be newer to MVT's work, the Emergency Response Service is our service to all the Music Venue Alliance members who are facing any sort of crisis or challenge. Since the charity created the Emergency Response Service in 2016, we've taken on hundreds upon hundreds of cases assessing how to bring those venues out of danger. The Emergency Response Service is essentially a big red button which sits on our website, and venues fill out the form, and that's received by the team I manage, the national coordinators. Check out the team page in the book so you can see their faces and you know who to look out for today. As the manager of the venue support team, I kind of think of us as a bit of a canary in the coal mine. Often before we see national or sometimes even localized spikes, the data is coming through the emergency response stats, which we can then later analyze and see the trends. So let's dig into this year's picture so far. Working from the bottom up, we've got noise complaints, which are making up 6% of the emergency response service cases. In previous years, that might have been more of the bulk of the charity's work. And the cases that we've been contacted about this year have only accounted for 6% of the caseload. It's not so much that this is becoming less of a problem for our sector, though it has improved on last year. It's just that, as you can see, it's proportionally dwarfed by other challenges. So if you receive a noise complaint, even if it feels like a one-off, please use the form and contact our team. We've got some excellent tools to help support you, from mediation advice, policy templates, and if all else fails, we jump into action and we can chair meetings with the council and complainants, which have been really successful in the past at de-escalating a case which is troubling a venue. So, carrying on, we've got lease and landlord tenancy issues, which are really remaining a common challenge and sit at 14% of the caseload. We do have gurus in our team who can help the venue support team look at leases. So if you're concerned about a particular clause, or you're unsure if your landlord is acting fairly, or something just takes you by surprise, we really want you to contact us about it. Coming in at 15%, we've got redevelopment and planning issues, essentially needing to respond to neighbouring residential planning applications next to your venue. It's only 15% of our caseload, but this actually represents 30 individual cases, which is more than the number of planning cases we dealt with in the entirety of last year. So, as you can imagine, it's keeping our team really busy, as each case is a lot of work. We also find that developers often place planning applications at the end of the year, sometimes even in the closing days of the last working week of December. So in reality, myself and my team, we're really anticipating that number is going to go up this year. Seeing that increase come through the emergency response service is helping advance our practical and political work in this field. It's why we want Agent of Change to be made into law across the UK. It's currently just planning guidelines in England and Wales and not adopted at all in Northern Ireland. So even when local authorities do adopt it into their local plans, there's no requirement for the developer to consider Agent of Change in their application. And it's also why we want Music Venue Trust to have the statutory right of consultation, which would ensure that MVT would be informed as soon as the building application goes in next to your venues, rather than relying on you being properly notified. Or in the case of one venue that we've been supporting this year, they only happened upon the notice on a lamppost next to their venue. So obviously having more of an early warning system would be far better and definitely de-escalate the risk to that venue. So if you are notified about a neighbouring application, please tell us straight away. As much run-up time as possible is needed to put in a most robust objection. And we've got experts in architecture, planning and acoustics who help us read through the applications with a fine-tooth comb and respond in a way that's technically so detailed and super thorough. And some of those gurus are in the speed networking today, so if you have an opportunity to meet them, please say hello and get 5 minutes to learn about their work, because then should it happen to you, you're going to be one step ahead and you're going to know the faces and you're going to understand that kind of technical expertise and the tools that we use to be able to support you. Which leaves us with one theme which has eclipsed all others this year: financial viability. This year it's been the leading or contributing factor of over half of the caseload, whereas last year it was more like a third of the emergency response service. Venues are increasingly telling us that they're unable to make key overhead payments, or they've accumulated debts and arrears which are really worrying them. This sort of challenge is by far and away the most difficult to resolve in the emergency response service, but we do have strategies to help, and we're really, really developing them this year. So we want you to talk to us about them and reach out for support. I'm not going to delve into now the reasons why we're seeing this come across the emergency response service, because Mark's going to talk about that himself. But if I can impart one thing on you today, it's that if this resonates with you, you're not alone in your experiences. We know how difficult it is to talk and tackle financial challenges, and it can be really hard to feel like you can see a path forward. But coming to the emergency response service is a really, really strong first step, so please do. There is one outside factor bringing venues into the emergency response service, and that is PRS. 2024 has seen a marked escalation in the threat posed to venues by PPL-PRS. We've seen an increase in the number of estimated invoices, which are greatly more than the end-agreed billing. We've seen an increase in the use of legal action to enforce on those bills, including enforcement on the estimated ones. We've seen the complete move away from any sort of system where PRS would acknowledge that they don't have responsibility to collect on unregistered songwriters or material in our sector, instead insisting on charging for everything, because one day someone might decide to register that set that was played in your venue, but there's no recourse to reimburse you if they don't. I feel at this juncture it's important for me to say, because we know up on this stage that saying the words PRS whips up a lot of anger and frustration. The charity and the venue support team will always advise venues on their responsibility to pay songwriters. And none of those cases, which make up the 12% of our workload, represent a venue unwilling to remunerate songwriters for their intellectual property. It's purely about the terms and conditions of the various live tariffs and the behaviour of PPL-PRS when enforcing them. There's an overlap, certainly, between PRS's enforcement on the debts that they claim and our financial viability stat. I have to say that PRS's preferred third-party debt enforcer is the most common debt enforcer to come across my desk time and time again. Shockingly, this year, we've also had 3 cases reach the stage of county court judgments, including ones which are trying to claim on debts which are based off estimated billings. So venues don't want to deny songwriters their dues. They just want to know that the songwriters they host or the material that they cover is actually what they're paying for. And they want to know that the bills are accurate, that they're properly communicated, and to be able to be anticipated, that they're manageable, and importantly, don't put venues at risk. So in order to address that challenge, MVT has made a new appointment this year. We now have Rights Management Lead Gareth Kelly. If you wouldn't mind standing up to give a little wave, wherever you are. Where is he? Oh, hey, there you are. Thanks, Gareth. Gareth is going to be doing a stint in the speed networking, and his email is in the book as well. So please take the opportunity to try and find him and have a chat and let us know any challenges that you're facing. Adding Gareth to our team has massively, massively amped up venue support team's ability to offer insight, offer support, and to de-escalate risk when venues are facing those challenges. And importantly, every single case that he learns about, we're building up that data and information, which is also feeding into our ability to prepare for the tariff LP review, which was part of our CMS Select Committee recommendations. So it's really important work. And that's me. Thank you.
So to go directly to that financial viability thing, 52% of cases coming into our support network. I always want to just revisit that thing of how many venues are trading, because that to us is the important statistic. There have been venue closures this year. I'm sure some of you know about people who've lost their venue or have stopped doing live music. The big change to the stat this year is we did see existing venues that had dropped out of the live music program reopening and putting some live music back on. So that was really encouraging. And overall, it's fairly stable. But all of you are reporting to us in the annual survey the same problem, the problem of how financially viable is it to run a venue. And that financial viability, when we looked into it, when we looked at the stats, we realized that this is an incredibly worrying trend, and it's been going on for a long time, but has now reached crisis point. And that trend is a complete collapse in touring. When I first started years and years ago in this, look at me now, I'm so fucking old. When I started doing this, there were, literally, does anybody remember Mega City 4? Mega City 4. I think they famously claimed to have played 366 shows in a 365-day year. If you did that now, you would be bankrupt by February. Bands cannot afford to pick up the cost of touring. Venues cannot afford to turn the fucking lights on. Agents are becoming incredibly averse to risk on behalf of their artists. Managers are averse to risk as well on behalf of their artists. Artists who we know for a fact when we talk to them, want to be out on the road. They want to be getting new audiences. This touring sector is absolutely at it's at as far as it can go without it completely toppling over. Something has to be done. I'm sure we'll get onto that in a bit. But just look at that top figure. The really key one, forget about the length of the tours. That's bad enough. 22 shows roughly on average 30 years ago, reduced down to 10.9 shows, 11 shows. It's halved the number of shows that are on your average tour. Much more important than that. I said to somebody the other day, imagine we were a social media company and we were telling people what to do. Imagine if we said to an artist, listen, we really want you to promote. So what we're going to do is we want to make sure that all your social media posts only reach about 25% of the population. Artists would think we were absolutely insane to suggest that they should limit their exposure to the public. But there are now 12 places. And I bet if we sat here for an hour, it'd take 10 minutes for people in this audience to name those 12 places that are on the primary and secondary tour circuit. And everywhere else is absolutely scrabbling for that one extra show that didn't go to one of those places. So when we looked at who'd had any kind of major tour thing and everything else, literally, I think we came up with about 22 locations in total now, and that's including one-offs. Even my own venue in Tunbridge Wells, that a great team now down there run. Chris, who does the booking, is a genius. He's filling that diary up with great shows. You know what they're not? They're not practically most of the time the new touring acts we want to support, want to develop those careers. Something has to change. What does that actually mean? It means a dramatic decrease in the total amount of live music in our communities, increasingly small number of places. But go right to the bottom of this list while you're reading it. You want to know what's going on with how unfinancially viable it is. You want to know why 52% of the cases coming in. Let's flick through some of these stats. How many tickets were sold? We're down to only 15 million. From a period 3 years ago, 21,600,000, I think it was. We're now down to 15.2 million being sold. It's a 39.7% decline in tickets being sold for live music at our level in only 2 years. And the driver is costs. People can't afford the hotels. People can't afford the bus. People can't afford the staff. People can't afford to turn the lights on. There's got to be more money. Look at the total value of the tickets. Total value of the tickets has declined rapidly. Weirdly, it's declined less rapidly than the shows, so obviously that's represented by ticket values per ticket going up. So tickets are going up a little bit, that's fine. 14.1% decline in gross income from live music. Meanwhile, what happens when artists can't afford to tour? Why are they playing in those 12 places? What's the decision there? Those 12 places are now investing an astonishing amount of money from their food, their beverage, from merch sales, from everything else they do. They are subsidizing live music at our level to an absolutely extraordinary amount of money. It cannot possibly carry on like this. The subsidy of live music is now at £161 million. You need to sell £161 million of beer to pay for the live music. And you're doing that completely on your own. Nobody at the top of the industry is saying to you, listen, I need you to break this new band. Nobody is saying to these bands, I need to get behind your tour costs. Bands are having to cut the number of shows. Venues are having to cut the risks they take. Promoters are cutting the risks they're taking. All of this information came out of our annual survey. And just in case anybody doesn't know, it is so important you do the annual survey. Who's done the annual survey this year? Nowhere near enough of you, all right? But listen, the work is extrapolated, so we know what we're talking about. This 104% increase in the subsidy of live music in only 2 years. The reason shows aren't happening is because you cannot afford to put them on. Artists cannot afford to play them. Meanwhile, total income of the sector absolutely escalated. Absolutely escalated. Brilliant. I'm really pleased about that. I'm delighted that there was more money in the sector. Come on, there's more money in the sector. Hooray. Should we do the next slide? You're still only making 0.5% profit. Boo. It's not a profit. I don't even know why we have a profitability slide. We should just say, listen, there's no profit left. I mean, that's the reality. And we've known this. We started talking about this in 2018 because of the survey work, because of the emergency response team. 6 years ago, we started saying, look, this isn't going to be sustainable. There are really dramatic things happening here. Energy costs up by, I spoke to one venue the other day who got a 440% increase in their energy bills. Nothing we can do is going to combat that on the side of the live music. Something has to change dramatically in the music industry itself. The financial reality, the number of venues making a loss is up. It's now 43.8% of you made a loss in the last 12 months. That causes me to question, and I did ask the question to Sophie and her team, and I think we thought about this. Listen, why aren't you closing? What's the matter with you? Can you not see the stats? I know why you're not closing. I talked about it in an interview recently, and I was on a call with Live Nation yesterday, and I told them bluntly, there's a hope bubble. You're all hoping that what you're doing is so important and must be recognized that you are clinging on. And I'm not going to ask the people who've actually told me that in this room to put their hands up unless they want to. But a lot of you in this room know you're waiting for this change. You're waiting for something to happen. So the question here is, what needs to be done about this? Who needs to act? What should they do?
I'm just going to pause a minute and just say, we haven't finished yet, and if you do need to find a seat for the next 20 minutes, there are some seats at the back there, because I know some of you have been standing up quite a while, and I'm sure people will move over if you want to go sit down. So, housekeeping is my thing, obviously. Right, so the question is, what needs to be done about this? In order to talk about this, I'd like to introduce Sophie Brownlee, MVT's External Affairs Manager, to lay out some of the work we're doing.
Thank you. This one's working. Excellent. Yeah, so no pressure there, I imagine. So many of you might know our political advocacy work has really stepped up yet again this year across all 4 nations. And we've seen huge change, not just in terms of a general election and the economic outlook, but also in terms of what politicians are saying about the music industry, and the fact really that they're saying something at all. What might once be industry-specific issues, so an Oasis tour or the economy of Taylor Swift, these are fast becoming political issues as well. But politics is about having a voice, and that's for all people to have a voice, not just the biggest acts and the biggest stadiums. And part of our role is to make sure that we're the voice in the room for venues like yourselves, and more often than not, hopefully one of the louder voices as well. And it was a huge privilege for us this year to be at the forefront of the Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee inquiry into grassroots music venues. The inquiry was launched here at Venues Day last year, and many of you gave up your time to meet the committee and talk about your personal experiences and the challenges that you face. Last week at the Conservative Party conference, Dame Caroline Dinenage, the determined and hugely supportive chair of that select committee, she was on a panel and she spoke about the evidence that many of you gave, and she called it devastating. And I think that really sums up the impact that your evidence had on MPs. The committee released their report in May, and hopefully many of you have seen it. They made a number of recommendations that, for a cross-party group of politicians, were forward-thinking and really quite unheard of. They recommended, and these are things we have been advocating for as well, that business rates be reformed to give venues certainty and long-term security, that the government launch a fan-led review of live and electronic music, that the agent of change principle in planning be put on a statutory footing in England and Wales, that there be a temporary cut to VAT for grassroots venues with a longer-term cut considered, and finally, that the live music industry commit to a voluntary grassroots contribution on arena and stadium tickets to support grassroots venues, artists and promoters. And that's just to name a few of the recommendations, and the report is online if you'd like to read it. Now, the committee recommended that grassroots contribution be in place by September, and it doesn't take a genius to work out that it is now October. Unfortunately, the government's response to this report, and therefore the industry's, was put on hold when the general election was called, and it's only really now, with summer over and the party conference season over, that the wheels of government are finally starting to turn again. We were thrilled to see so many venues write to their local candidates during the election campaign in July, and this resulted in pledges to work with us from 655 cross-party candidates, including a collective public announcement of support from the Green Party in England. Elections often offer huge opportunities for change, especially elections that involve the kind of seismic upheaval that we saw this year. There are many new MPs in Parliament, lots of whom we've already met, and they're really engaged and motivated to work for their communities. But it also means there's a lot of new issues to contend with. I'm sure you've all read and heard a lot in the news about the cost of living, the black hole that the Treasury finds itself in, and the desperate situation of many public services and communities. And actually, we know many of you face these challenges on the ground. And that makes it a lot harder for the spotlight to shine on other issues. But it also means that there are so many politicians and officials out there listening for ideas on evidence on how they can change things for the better. A lot of what Labour has spoken about in their approach to governing and how it will be different to the last 14 years. Now, we can debate here all day about whether that will turn out to be true, but I don't think that's what you all came here for. And if it is, you can find me at the bar afterwards and we can debate it. But some of the key changes Labour are looking for are about shared missions, so no more silo working. They want to devolve decision-making away from Westminster and ensure that local leaders and local people get to play the role that they have the expertise for. And they want to ensure a long-term preventative approach with a focus on sustainable improvement rather than short-term incremental gain. So for our work on issues like community ownership, working with councils to ensure the agent of change principle is upheld and that new residential buildings are properly soundproofed, and for a grassroots contribution to ensure the long-term financial security of venues, this approach offers a real opportunity. Lisa Nandy, the new Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, speaks lovingly about grassroots football and the positive, life-affirming impact that these clubs have on their local communities, such as her constituency in Wigan. And we know the same applies to venues, and more MPs are standing up and saying this now, and asking why grassroots venues can't access the same support that football clubs get. So while the election played out in England, we continued our ongoing engagement with local and devolved governments, including local authorities, the Welsh and Scottish parliaments, and metro mayors. So in Wales, we've continued to advocate for higher business rate relief following the cut in April, and many members of the Senedd are raising this on our behalf and continuing to do so as budget negotiations take place. In Scotland this month, Patrick Harvey MSP, the co-leader of the Greens, asked the first oral question in the Scottish Parliament on the grassroots contribution. We're working with the cross-party group for music there to take forward this initiative, possibly on a devolved basis. And we continue to campaign on improving transport across Scotland, reforming business rates, and ensuring that the agent of change principle is upheld in law. The last few months have also seen us upscale our political work in Northern Ireland. We've been meeting with officials from across departments, and many of our Northern Ireland steering group members contributed to our evidence submission to the licensing review, and we're looking forward to seeing those policy recommendations come back. I think what's really exciting about all of this work is the understanding and recognition that we are increasingly seeing when we speak to all kinds of politicians about venues and the work that you all do. Politicians are really excited to tell us about their local venues and where they like to go out, and they're really keen to understand how they can better support you on both a local and a national level. The widespread press coverage and that unequivocal political support for grassroots venues shown by the CMS report generated welcome further cross-party interest in our work, and also lended our policy asks a credibility in all UK parliaments that will be really useful as we look to ensure that those recommendations are enacted. We're working to ensure that grassroots music venues are not just the preserve of the culture department, be that in Cardiff, Edinburgh or London, but to ensure that policies affecting them are considered by the business departments, the housing departments, and even the science and technology departments. We know that venues do not just deliver music, although obviously that's a huge part of what you do, and we know that politicians are finally understanding that now as well. So in terms of next steps, the CMS committee is currently reforming, and Dame Caroline Dinenage has been reappointed as chair. In a very timely fashion, we're due to meet with Lisa Nandy later this month, and we'll be speaking to her about the grassroots contribution, the fan-led review, business rates, VAT, and planning reform, and asking how the government intends to support these issues. Following this, we'll continue to ensure that the government is held to account over the committee's recommendations, and that we continue to advocate for real legislative change that makes a difference for venues across the whole of the UK, and that we keep up the momentum we have achieved this year on a local, national, and industry level. Thank you.
Sophie also has the fun task of writing the annual report. Just quickly on the annual report, I'm sure a lot of you are aware that having an annual report that brings together statistics that you can learn, you can quote at people, we can quote at people, is an incredibly powerful tool for us. We will be producing Annual Report 2024, and like last year, we will be holding launch events in the Westminster Parliament in January, in Senedd in February. Scottish one got a bit interesting, not much availability in Scottish Parliament, but we are coming up to Holyrood in April. And we will, as last year, make sure that we have information sheets of stats for each of those nations. Northern Ireland is an ongoing work in progress. We're very much hoping that by 2025 annual report, we will have stats for Northern Ireland as well, but we need to do a little bit of building work there first.
So that's the political side of things. I mean, even I didn't know all that was happening. So that's. Did I miss a meeting? I missed a few meetings. Okay, so that's the government. The microphone got handed back to me, so you all know what I'm going to say. What about the fucking music industry? Look, we've got to be realistic in this room, okay? We're not the enemy. We are part of the music industry. We are the building block. We're the part of the music ecosystem. If anybody hasn't seen, there's a nice article in the Times this morning, and it finishes with a really important paragraph. And that paragraph is, for all of my music industry colleagues in the room, and I'm so pleased so many of you turned up today, there are two options left when it comes to the grassroots contribution. The two options are that we all get our act together, we're all stakeholders in it, it happens on every arena and stadium show because we want it to. The money comes into a fund, hopefully. Is John Collins here? Hey, John. You know, John from Live is doing incredible work trying to make this happen alongside Steve, who's the chair of Live, which is the umbrella body. That is the best solution. Promise me, well, Sophie will back me up on this. I've been around government, and no matter how brilliant this new government is, they wouldn't be as good at this as we would be as a music industry. We can administer such a fund, we can get it behind eyes, we can get it into your venue, we can do really clever investments and everything. The second option is that the government will legislate for this, and it will be a statutory levy like they have in France. It will be 3.5% of the gross value of the tickets at arena and stadium level, and might even start hitting some of our bigger festivals. John Rostron's here, I think. John, you around? John's there. He's Association of Independent Festivals. We've had lots of conversation with John about what's happening with festivals. Independent festivals need some support, you know. But we've got to see this happen. Those are the two options. Voluntary, happening on every big show, or statutory because the government gets involved. In the Times this morning I said, there isn't a third option where all the music venues close and nobody minds. Everybody minds. Every meeting we have with an MP, that MP is talking about the venues in their constituency that they've got emails about that are closing down. The closure of Bath Moles last year was a horrendous time for Wira Hobhouse, the local MP. I think she had 1,000 emails of people saying, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to represent our constituency and you've let this 45-year institution close down. This has got to happen, and I'm quite frustrated, and I don't mind naming the companies. I had a meeting with Live Nation yesterday, and I spent 10 minutes of the meeting going back through the thing of whether we needed to have a contribution or not. That argument is over. It's finished. If you think this government isn't going to be prepared to tax Live Nation while it announces billions of pounds of profits every quarter, you're kidding yourself. If you work for that company and you're in the room, please go back and tell them to get active, because the last thing this industry needs at the top level is a statutory regulator pointing a torch into all the dark crevices of all the nefarious things you've done to make money, asking you where that bit of money went or why that ticket is that much money and where did that ticket service charge go. And, you know, like, listen, it's plenty possible. Here's my message to Michael Rapino that I get in trouble for every year. He's the CEO of Live Nation and lives in Los Angeles, I think. If your ticket price can accommodate the bonus you gave yourself last year, and it can accommodate putting fuel in your private jet so you can fly around the world, I'm pretty certain it can accommodate enough in that ticket price so the venues in this room don't have to fucking close down. Get your shit together. If it's voluntary, I think we could predict that actually it will have to happen in 2025, although it's depressing the number of arena and stadium shows that have been announced for 2025 that don't have it on. But I think, meanwhile, what are we actually doing? What are Music Venue Trust doing to support you? Who's the next slide? Is that you? Do you want to do own our venues? Oh, is it? God, you get to talk to me a lot, don't you? I want to. Is Matt? Where's Matt? Where's Matt around? Stand up, please, Matt. Everybody, give Matt a massive round of applause. Matt, for those of you who don't know, Matt is you're not even the acting CEO anymore, aren't you? Just the CEO, aren't you? COO, you're the COO. Does anybody know what these titles mean? No, not really. Thank you very much, Bev. You are the Chief Operating Officer, aren't you? Matt is the Chief Operating Officer of Music Venue Properties. That is a charitable community benefit society, for those of you who haven't heard about it. And recently, who's been here while we've been on this journey for Own Our Venues, telling you we needed to change the ownership of the venues? Hands up who remembers all this stuff. That's a good number of you. One of the underlying problems is too many of you don't own your own buildings. We were actually formed, blimey, do you remember 10 years ago, Bev, when we called it Music Venue Trust because we wanted to create a national trust of music venues. We wanted to buy the freeholds of those venues and then give you back really great leases that promoted you and said, brilliant, get on with doing your job of providing live music in your community. Matt's now bought a third venue. Last year we were able to announce they bought the first one. Is Rachel here? Rachel's just there. So Rachel's at the Snug in Atherton, which I went to and was just an amazing community, and Rachel runs a fantastic venue. That was the first one that Matt and his team bought for Music Venue Properties. Then the second one came along. Is Matt here? Where's Matt from the Ferret? Stand up if you're with the Ferret. I went. Do you know what? The best thing that happens when they buy these venues is I finally get to go to some and meet some of the fucking insane people that run them. So I mean, by the way, look at yourselves if you're laughing at somebody next to you. So brilliant. It's such a great venue. They're a really great team. And now finally, the third one has now been bought. Is Jordan from the Bunkhouse here? Where is he? Hiding at the fucking back, just like you did at school. Jordan and his team it's such a fantastic venue. So there are now 3 venues that will never be closed down. Can't be sold by some commercial operator. They're permanently protected. They're operating under a new cultural lease where the ownership company, Music Venue Properties, rewards them for putting on live music. Imagine that, a landlord that says to you, please put on more live music, let me see how I can help you. I would like to see this scheme expand to every single venue in the country. That'll obviously still be work that Matt will be doing long after I'm gone. But it's super important work. We really need to see more of it happening. Matt, I'm not allowed to say what you're doing next. Good. He just winked at me. But I can tell you that they have another 2, I'm allowed to say. He has another 2 in his pocket. So it's fantastic work. If you're not already a shareholder, you should be. But please go out to your local communities and say, people need to be shareholders in this. Let's take control of these music venues. Let's be our own landlords. Let's protect our own circuit.
So, you will have gathered that we do a lot of work on the grassroots contribution because it's such a central point of what Music Venue Trust work is about in order to protect, secure and improve grassroots music venues. Anyone who was at Venues Day last year will know that it is possible because Enter Shikari have done it, which is why we gave them the outstanding contribution last year. They applied the £1 contribution to their arena tour, and they were matched at some of the venues as well, proving that not only is it possible for the artist, it is also possible for the venues and the rest of the teams involved in it. Now, sadly, this example has not spread as far as we would like it to, but we do know it's possible, and some of you will have seen that the Mission got a big boost recently.
God, you should applaud that, for fuck's sake. I know it's unusual to applaud Coldplay. You music snobs, a lot of you. Right. I've sold more records than you, and I mean all of you. Listen, I think it's very important, though, and the reason it's got a special slide, genuinely, that band have gone out on a limb. It's the biggest live band there is in the world. If they can do it, everybody else can do it. But let me just tell you how it happened, because it's important. Where's George? You here, George? He's at the back. Oh, hiding at the back. Stand up, George. In fact, anybody from Save Our Scene, stand up.
And Alex.
And Alex, are you there? And Posey, are you there? Right. Everybody applaud those, because this would not have happened without George and his team. George and his team took a phone call. I think you took a phone call directly from Chris Martin, I'm going to say, didn't you, George? Yeah, he did. And Chris Martin phoned and said, why are all these venues closing down? What can we do about it? And instead of being selfish, and instead of saying, oh, maybe I can make some money out of this, whatever, George said, you need to talk to Mark David. And that was in December last year. And that's how long it took us to get between the initial idea of Coldplay wanting to do something and this happening. But I want to make it clear to you, Live Nation didn't do it, SJM didn't do it, Kilimanjaro didn't do it, ASM Global didn't do it, Wembley Stadium didn't do it, Coldplay fucking did it. And that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is that everybody should be involved, everybody can accommodate this, everybody can put money in. There are conversations going on. I know John and I want to point out John and Steve again. They are working incredibly hard to try and make this a reality. They deserve your support for that. Can it be done? It can only be done if the multinational part of the music industry that's making all this money gets its fucking shit together. They should do that quickly before Lisa Nandy loses her temper. The important thing to understand about the grassroots contribution is we want to find a way that every pound raised goes directly into supporting live music. As an organisation, we don't want to charge massive administration costs. That's not what we're into. We try and do whatever we can to make sure that the money we're raising is actually going to you as the venues when it comes through us. But in this particular case with the grass, we would like it to go to promoters, we want it to go to artists. Certainly with this Coldplay money, we want to try and make that as clean as we possibly can. And so we are looking at our own model. How do we fund the people on this stage? How do we fund this whole event? How do we do things like a pipeline investment fund that's outside of that? What are we doing about that? So we have appointed a new person. Well, I say new. How long have you been in post now?
6 months.
6 months. Kim, this is Kim, who's been with us for 6 months. And Kim is basically our new fundraising and philanthropy lead. We are aiming through this work to be self-funded as an organisation so that every penny donated through any kind of grassroots contribution will eventually end up in the hands of a venue, a promoter or an artist to support live music. Kim's going to walk you through how we're going to try and do that.
Thanks, guys. So yeah, I look after all things philanthropy and fundraising here at MVT, and I thought it might be interesting to go through the income streams that are currently coming into MVT now and understand our 5-year strategy moving forward. So as we all know, Music Venues Trust supports a vast amount of work across the UK. We've heard about the Emergency Response Service, which is a dedicated team of professionals that support venues within crisis. We have projects like the MVT cohorts, a project working with artists, promoters, managers, and venues that go out and tour in areas that don't get touring at all. We've spoken about the grassroots contribution as well. All of these moving parts cost money operationally, and it's my job to help fill that operational cost. So I thought it'd be quite interesting to look through the income streams coming in currently. So we have MVA membership at the moment, which is you guys supporting us monthly with monthly membership costs. That comes directly back to you guys, and we don't take any administration fee on that at all. We also have brand partnerships. Our brand partnerships like Fred Perry, which our core staff are wearing at the moment, and Jack Daniels, which is the drink you'll be drinking later. These are brands that share the same values as us and want to connect with us and fund us with our strategy. And then we have fundraising and philanthropy, which is the piece that I look after and that I support. And I thought it might be interesting to look at our 5-year strategy and just have a look at sort of the target areas for us in the next 5 years. So we've spoken about the featured artist contribution. We've seen how Enter Shikari has sort of carved out the way, and Coldplay have carved out the way to getting these ticket contributions back into us. But actually, we believe that there are more artists and there are more bands that can support us. So we will actively be going out and having those conversations, as many different people as possible to keep on supporting us. We also have community fundraising as a target. So we believe that the public, as Mark and Bev have said, do not want to see grassroots venues closing down at all. So we are actively going out to the public. And I'm really pleased to say next year we are launching a tiered fundraising campaign to ask the general public to give £5 regularly, £10 regularly to be part of a community that supports us as a charity. We also have corporate partnerships, and we do corporate partnerships, I would say, really, really well. We have some great partnerships. So one of them is Warner Music. Warner Music has been a partner for, I think it's 2 years now, and have been a charity partner. And we support them to fundraise internally. So they set a target on their end, and we support them to reach that target and to fund us. Major donors. So major donors technically are high net worth individuals. We know that the music industry is full of these high net worth individuals. We are going to go out and start talking to them and bringing them in strategically to help support us financially. And finally, legacy. So legacy is all about that end of donor journey. It's all about having a conversation about end of life and will contributions. So I know I rushed through that quite quickly, but that's essentially what the fundraising strategy will be in the next 5 years. I hope that's helpful. Mark.
And then what do we do with that money when we bring it in? Well, we've got, as you know, we've got the live projects. At the moment, that's being ably covered for us by Tom, wherever Tom is. Tom's over on the end there. But I think Rebecca's here somewhere. Not sure where she is. She's around. Rebecca's been on maternity leave. She'll be back in January. I think a lot of you in this room will have had a show that we've underwritten or we've funded or whatever. We want to do a lot more of that because back to the earlier slides, look, there's just not enough tours out there and they're not going to enough places. And if we can use, particularly corporate sponsorship, if we can use that to underwrite some of these tours and get them out into different places, make them viable for you, make them viable for the artists. Who got a MEF show in this room? Has anybody here who got a MEF? Okay. They were fucking brilliant, weren't they? Yeah. Proper night out. I mean, and they did really well on ticket numbers. Did you do all right on the show? Yeah. There you go. We want to do more of that, so we're trying to build that up. It's already a big piece of work, but we're constantly looking for corporate partners. And again, there are corporate partners in this room. If you want to get behind getting more artists into more locations, come to us. We have an absolute brilliant plan of how to do it, and we have a team that can definitely deliver it for you. Bev.
Thank you. Pipeline Investment Fund. We announced it at Venues Day 2 years ago, and since then, some of you have been successful in applying to it. In fact, 103 venues got a Pipeline Investment Fund grant over the period of time that the fund was active. Many of you will be aware it is currently closed. That's because we haven't got any money. When we get money from doing live projects through brand partnerships, we plan to reopen the Pipeline Investment Fund because although it is only a fund for which you can apply £5,000, we know that quite often the margin on something that will make a real difference to a grassroots music venue is actually really small. We've had applications for £1,500 that have completely transformed the way a venue can work. So the thing we're constantly trying to explain is it's not always about huge amounts of money, it's just about having money available that is easily accessible. So we're very much hoping that we will be able to reopen the Pipeline Investment Fund at some stage in the future. But I'm also going to pass you on to Sophie.
So the emergency response hardship funds are something which we developed very, very quickly at the end of last year when we were looking at when the venue support team was really just listening to venues' experience in the last October through to December of last year. And I spoke to my colleague at the time, Clara, and Clara spoke to Mark, and we realized that we needed to do something quickly and fast, and it needed to be impactful. So emergency response hardship funds, you won't see a form that's sitting on the website. It's not something which is publicly advertised, but Music Venue Alliance members, you will have seen that they've been talked about in our private membership and our emails and everything. So the emergency response hardship funds is come from the pipeline investment fund pot. They're, again, only up to £5,000, but that's just keep them incredibly targeted, incredibly impactful. And that comes through a process of very, very careful assessment by the venue support team, where we're looking at whether a venue is in danger of closing within the coming 3 months, and where the point is that they're going to stabilise and what that fund can do. So we have to write this report, and Mark signs it off, and then we can just get that grant out super quickly. So it's just another way in which money coming in is flowed straight back out in an incredibly precise and targeted way that is the difference between a venue having to make the decision to close or not.
And all of that, so just before Bev comes in on the final thing we want to talk about is there's a lot happening to try and sort of support you. There is one thing that we want to talk about as we change this model, and I think you can probably pick up, we are determined to change it. We are determined to get you the financial support you deserve, that you've earned, and that you are entitled to, frankly. But what is important is to start thinking, we need you to start thinking, okay, how am I positioned? What does it look like when Music Venue Trust give me a emergency hardship grant? How is that sitting with your local community? How is your venue engaging with it? How are you representing yourselves? And for that end, we've actually created a new project that Bev's going to talk you through.
And I'm going to do it quickly because I know it's nearly lunchtime and you're all getting itchy. Okay, receiving grant funding immediately opens you up to more scrutiny. Some of you are aware of this if you had CRF funding in the pandemic, if you've had funding from Creative Scotland, Arts Council England, Creative Wales. We want you to be ready for if and when the grassroots contribution happens, and we want you to be clearly defined as cultural venues and community hubs. And to try and tackle this, we've created a project that we hope is easily digestible and, most importantly, will not create lots of extra work, because we know you haven't got lots of extra time. So you as venues know what you stand for and who you are and what's important. The question is, do others? And we've had some really interesting conversations with the pilot venues for the Ethical Venues Project, and we're incredibly grateful for them admitting that quite often they know really clearly in their team what they feel about societal issues, but they haven't told anyone. And this is a real recurring theme in cultural venues generally, not just in grassroots music venues. Customers care about things like how green you are. They care about whether you have policies on inclusion or whether you have an accessible venue. But quite often, even if you don't have the perfect venue, and many of you in grassroots music venues cannot possibly have the perfectly accessible venue because they are converted buildings, telling people what you do have can go a really long way towards people understanding who you are and what you stand for. So we have created the Ethical Venues Project, which is in pilot form at the moment, and it aims to tell everyone what your positions are on access, inclusion, and sustainability or environmental responsibility. These are not scary things. You already have a position. You just need to work out how to articulate it. And this is going to be a piece of work that MVT is going to do with MVA members throughout 2025, but we would really encourage you this afternoon to come and take part in one of the 4 workshops that are running in Night Gallery on the other side of the courtyard, where Sophie and Chris and the pilot venues are going to talk you through the conversations that we're already having and make it simple for you. It's not scary. It's just about having conversations and working out how to talk about your venue and tell people what you already do. So I think quite a lot of MVT stuff over the last few years has been trying to say to you, you already know this, you just need to tell other people about it. And Ethical Venues is very much that. So please do, particularly if you've got several people from your venue here. I know we've got networking, I know we've got panels, I know we've got stands, but if you can send someone to do an Ethical Venues workshop during the afternoon, I think you'll find it really useful. And also then when we send you more information about it, you'll already have a head start on it. Okay.
Really can't underemphasize how important it is that you are positioned to receive funding And when you're asked questions what you're using it for, you can point at stuff like this and say, this is the kind of venue we are. We've nearly done it. Hooray! I bet you're all ready for lunch. Sorry it's overrun a little bit, but of course we were just trying to accommodate the wonderful Transport for London transport system. There's one set of people that are absolutely central to this conversation, and when we started planning Venues Day 2024, we said, actually, after 10 years, we've really realised what's absolutely central to this conversation is the artists. It's the artist. It doesn't matter whether they're going to go and headline arenas and stadiums. It doesn't matter if they're going to play white noise and a flugelhorn. You create the space for artists. And so we, with our colleague Sam Duckworth, is Sam around somewhere? Stand up, Sam, go on. Sam, as some of you will recognise, is Get Cape, Wear Cape, Fly. And we've been working with Sam on the concept of the fan-led review. But we asked, Sam came to us and said, I think the venue should hear from artists. So we have a little film that's been made by artists, and they want to tell you what they think about grassroots music venues, what it means to them. And then we'll have lunch. Is the sound on this laptop? It is.
It begins at home.
For years, the UK has led the world in storytelling through music.
Triumphs and challenges of communities across the UK have sung out across the world.
Live performance acts as a portal for the world to glimpse the spirit of our villages, towns and cities. Our stories are reflected on the global stage.
Through live music, we join together and experience the wonder of noise en masse and on our doorsteps. We become connected with each other and ourselves.
We must recognise live music's important role in the cultural fabric of our society, as industry, as policymakers and as custodians.
We must safeguard our grassroots venues and proudly champion them.
They're extraordinary and deserve our unwavering support and investment.
Innovation thrives in grassroots music venues and ripples outwards into our daily lives. They mould our thinking, articulate our environment and stir our deepest emotions.
Live music is a skilled art form on and off the stage.
We learn on our doorsteps, supported by our local community.
Call it R&D, skills development, or simply learning on the job.
Grassroots music venues play a vital part in the talent pipeline.
Grassroots music venues are for all levels and all ages. They are like-minded community centres. Their contribution to the economy is significant, and their contribution to the social fabric is priceless.
For the UK to remain a world leader in live music, we must nurture and protect the spaces where it all begins.
Grassroots music venues.